artists, and welcome back. This week we're going to be making some spring flowers similar to a print that was done by an artist named Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was most well known for his artwork during the pop art movement. You might recognize some of his most famous pieces as the ones with the Campbell's soup cans. But he had a piece very similar to this one with some flowers on top of a textured grass background. If you look really closely, you can see the different lines going in the different directions where the grass is. And the way that you can achieve that is by painting with a fork. Weird, but it works. So I'm going to be showing you two different ways that you can make your textured grass background. One with paint and a fork, and if you don't have paint available to you, I will show you how you can get the same effect with simple markers or crayons or whatever it is that you have to color with at home. If you are going to do the paint method, you're going to need a piece of paper for your background, plastic fork, or a real one if that's all you have. Just make sure that you wash this before you use it to eat your next meal. Paper plate for your paint, green paint, and if you would also like to make some light green, I would suggest throwing in a little bit of yellow on your plate that you can mix with your dark green when you're done to make a light green. It looks really nice when you have the two different greens going on in your background. This video is part 1 of 2 for this project. In the first part in this video, we're going to just make the background, and then in another video, I'll lead you through some different ways that you can make some flowers to add on top for a completed picture. All right, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Okay, I have all my supplies ready, and I am about to get started painting my grassy background for my Andy Warhol flowers. Now, before you start painting with a fork, one thing that I didn't mention before is make sure that if you're using a real fork and you don't have plastic ones, that's okay with mom, dad, or whoever's at home. You wouldn't want to go taking out the fine china to do a painting. I don't think your parents would like that very much. So always make sure you have mom and dad's permission before you start doing art. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the back of my fork, and I have my paint over here. I'm going to start with my dark green, and then I'll use my yellow to mix what I have left to make my light green. So I'm going to gently press my fork into my paint, make sure I've got a decent amount here, and if I press my fork down several times, and I can even go back to my first one, I start making kind of grassy lines. Now these are all going in the same direction. I can change that up a bit. I can turn my fork in different directions, and I don't just have to print it down flat. I could take it and drag it. So I could drag my fork through some of these spaces to start spreading my paint around and creating more of that grassy background. I want to make sure that I'm covering the majority of my paint, and it's always a good idea when you're painting too to have an old piece of paper or some newspaper underneath your main sheet of paper to help protect the surface that you're working on. I don't really want to paint my dining room table green, so I have this piece of black construction paper taped down to help me protect it. I'm going to drag my fork around in different directions and really fill up the space. That's pretty good for my dark green. Ooh. Now see, sometimes that might happen. If you hold your fork sideways, it's going to lose that illusion of the texture. So you want to make sure that you go back with your fork and make some lines there. Really fill it in. This part's a little more filled in over here, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. And drag some more texture. All right, now I want to make light green, so I'm going to rotate my plate here. I'm going to take some of my yellow. I'm just going to mix it right together. The more yellow you have, the lighter green you will get. You guys can see where I'm mixing. I'm getting this really nice lime yellow. I'm just going to mix all my yellow in there. This is definitely a little bit more paint than I need, so try not to waste your paint. Okay, now I'm going to take my yellow green. I don't even need to rinse my brush. And I'm going to put hints of my yellow green on top of my dark green. I'm going to start off by printing it, and then I'm going to drag the fork through. Now you also want to be careful when you're printing. You don't want to jam it down too hard on the paper, because when you pick it up, you might actually end up flinging some paint at yourself. Now I'm going to add some more grassy paint strokes. I'm actually going to pick up the edge of my paper and kind of just go off the edge a little bit there. Because sometimes when you concentrate too much on the middle of the paper, you're going to completely miss the edges. And then it might make your painting or your picture look like it's kind of awkwardly floating in the middle. You don't want that either. All right, there we go. And there I have my painted grassy background. Just gonna dab in a few more little bits there. And once that dries, I'll be able to take my flowers and put that on the side. Now, if you have a plastic fork, you can just throw this away, but if you did get permission to use a real one, make sure you clean it off immediately so it's nice and clean and ready to go. I'm gonna let this dry and it will be ready for my flowers the next time I come back to it. All right, so I'm gonna give you another example of how to make this grass with some markers. So let me clean up my space and then I'll show you how to do that. Making your grassy background with just markers or crayons or colored pencils or whatever kind of coloring supply you have is just as easy. I'm gonna do mine with markers because I like the way that markers pop out and look bold against my white paper. I have two different markers here. I have a regular green and this one's called iguana green, but I figure since it's a lighter green, the combination of the two will give me the same idea that I had with my light green and dark green paint. I'm actually gonna start off with my dark green. And I'm gonna pretend as if I was using the fork. And I'm just going to make groups of 4 lines that kind of go in different directions all over my paper. Now, if you're having a hard time moving your hand around, remember, your paper is not permanently stuck to your table. You can always move it around. You could do a whole bunch going in one direction, and then you can rotate it. Now, at some point, you're going to start overlapping them, and that's okay. You want that. We want this to really fill up our paper. So once you've kind of covered most of the spaces, start overlapping. And then once I'm done with my dark green, I'm going to do the same thing with my light green until I feel that I've filled my paper with enough. And there we go. I've made a grassy textured background with just markers. I can do the same thing with crayons, colored pencils. I could even take some crayons and even add more on top of all of this, whatever I feel works for me. I just want to take a second and compare our two backgrounds. Now, obviously the paint one kind of covers it a little bit more, but both of them have the same idea, and I could keep going with this. I think I'm definitely going to take some crayon and maybe add a little bit more. But whatever works for you. Remember, use what you have. There is no right or wrong way to do this project. Just use it, use what you have, and do your best. All right? Have fun, be creative, and when you're ready to move on to the flower step, go to part 2 video on my YouTube channel and here on my teacher website. See you again soon.